Breaking news, friends, and this is sensational. The Kremlin is in panic. Putin is urgently gathering in the bunker because the GUR carried out a brilliant special operation in Moscow, the Moscow region, St. Petersburg, Crimea, and Kaliningrad. The remnants of the Russian Armed Forces Black Sea Fleet have been destroyed. The attempt by Russian occupiers to cross the Dnipro in the first part of the Kherson region ended very quickly before it even began.
Hey there, how are you?
Moreover, Neptune missiles are striking Crimea. Ukraine's defense forces are taking out Russia's air defense system in Crimea feet first. The deoccupation of the peninsula is being prepared. Evacuation has begun on the peninsula. There's a line for the Crimean bridge. It's huge right now. Moreover, the city attacked an energy facility in Russia's Kaliningrad, leaving a Russian defense industry enterprise without power. Ukrainian long-range kamikaze drones attacked the Alabuga Special Economic Zone in Tatarstan. Several factories are located there, including the production of Shahed drones, also known as Garan 2. And in addition, they attacked the occupiers' airbase in the Voronezh region. Everything is on fire there. They also attacked Nevinomysky Azot in the Stavropol region, which is a factory. And in Russia's Samara region, the Novokuybishevsk catalyst plant was attacked. It is part of the Rosneft structure. And a new video has appeared showing the crash of a Russian Su-25 near Solidar. It was friendly fire, as I understand it, shot down by another Russian aircraft. Let's discuss all this with the well-known military analyst Roman Svitan. Roman Grigorievich, welcome.
Thank you. I wish everyone good health.
Roman Grigorievich, what do you think about the GUR's special operations? They are joining with the SBU and starting a series of actions, for example, in Kaliningrad, near St. Petersburg, near Moscow, and in Moscow. What do you think?
We once described these people with you, those who do this kind of work, as the concerned. These are concerned people in Russia, ranging from partisans like Maltsev to the resistance forces of the republics that are trying to break free from Russian oppression, to destroy this Russian prison of nations. They are working for our victory as well. First and foremost, they are working for themselves. By destroying the Russian economy, by destroying Russian military mechanisms, including the military itself, naturally this helps us. And of course, we will stand firmly behind this, and we thank our friends for this kind of work. Sometimes certain actions are carried out under the guidance of our special services, the Foreign Intelligence Service, the Main Intelligence Directorate, and the Security Service of Ukraine. Our border guard intelligence also takes part in these operations. So all these concerned individuals, sometimes when it comes to certain military targets, are overseen by our special services. That's why there's now such a wave sweeping across Russia, a very specific one. And it's also connected to the destruction of the Russian oil and gas sector. It's very easy to destroy it. Some of these concerned individuals simply set fire to forests through which the pipelines of Russian Gazprom or Neftegas, in whatever they're called, run, and they just burn down. Pipelines burn, oil pumping stations burn, inspection hatches, air ducts, and the so-called inlet and outlet collectors at oil refineries all burn as well. In other words, they're working very actively and powerfully. And this is happening even in the enclaves too. The GUR boasted that they had taken out a power installation in the Kaliningrad region, basically shutting down and cutting off power generation in that area. So, well done, impressive work. Of course, it's unlikely that the GUR itself was directly involved. The task was probably carried out either by GUR's confidants or by concerned citizens. A huge thank you to them for that. Friends, please like this video and leave a comment. Write a few kind words to our special services. This is very important for the armed forces of Ukraine and the main directorate of intelligence of the Ministry of Defense. It really matters. And in the comments, let us know where you're watching from and write a few warm words in support of Ukraine. Roman Leningovich, in general, when we talk about Kaliningrad, how important is it to strike at Russia's military-industrial complex? There, considering what could potentially arise, the zone of turbulence. Well, it's an exclave, the Kaliningrad region. It's a true exclave squeezed between two countries, Poland and Lithuania, against the Baltic. There is no direct connection with Russia at all. Through Belarus, via the Suwałki corridor, it's about 100 kilometers. It's unrealistic. By the Baltic Sea, of course, there are a few ferries running. Some depart from St. Petersburg. There are several ferry crossings. There are a few shipping routes, and of course military ships as well. That is, vessels, military ships are around, but it's an exclave, which makes it very difficult to defend. The Russians understand this perfectly well, and practically the entire exclave, the whole Kaliningrad region, Königsberg to be precise, Kaliningrad is meant here, König as they call it, even the Kaliningrad residents themselves understand perfectly well that it is after all the German city of Königsberg. That is, yes, there are still serious shipyards left there from Germany from that war from the last millennium, shipyards for building military vessels. So they still build them there, and some of them even end up with us, including in the Black Sea. It is precisely there at those shipyards that they are built. A significant part of the Baltic fleet is stationed there, of course, the Russian Baltic fleet specifically. Specifically in Königsberg, in the Kaliningrad region, excuse me, or let's just call it Königsberg, I like that better. And naturally in terms of aviation as well. There is quite a large number of troops. They are stationed there. That's why it's very important for us, but not just for us, of course. It's especially important for the Baltic countries and also for NATO to limit the expansion of Russia's military presence in that enclave. There are various mechanisms. Moreover, for us, for example, since Russia is now an aggressor, we have the right to destroy any Russian military targets anywhere, no matter where they are located. It doesn't matter. At sea, on land, in the fourth dimension, in Antarctica, anywhere at all. A military target can be destroyed. And our special services can handle this. Then most likely they are doing so. We've repeatedly said that operations are being carried out in Königsberg and quite successfully at that. Roman Nikolaevich, brilliant news from temporarily occupied Crimea. First of all, Neptune missiles regularly strike there, attacking military bases and airfields. And now Ukraine's defense forces are simply wiping out Russia's air defense system in Crimea. We are destroying this system. And everyone is writing that this is preparation for the deoccupation of the peninsula, and on the peninsula itself. Evacuation has now begun. I checked literally an hour ago, there were huge lines at the Kerch Bridge. What do you think? The thing is, any operation to deoccupy will begin with an air attack. And any air attack starts with achieving air superiority, that is, destroying the enemy's air defense. First the ground-based systems, then naturally the airborne ones. And right now we are witnessing the beginning of this operation. Although, to be honest, from a military perspective, it's a rather weak start. Well, look, once a week we talk about something flying over Crimea. They took something out here, something out there. There's no systematic approach to the work. What does a systematic approach mean? It means every day, every night, ideally at night, so that fewer civilians suffer. It doesn't matter if there's civilians there, like the Russians or our diehard Ukrainians who say, "Wow, we don't target civilians." For us, it's very important to shield civilians from direct strikes and then continue targeting. It's better to hit military targets at night, air defense, missile systems, and enemy military facilities. And this is being done properly, competently, but the frequency is still insufficient. This should be happening every night. But right now, it's only once a week or even once every couple of weeks. That's far too little. As for this issue, if we're talking about Neptunes, Neptune is a so-called coastal missile system, which is currently overseen by Nishpei, meaning the commander of the Ukrainian Navy, the naval forces of Ukraine. He should have an entire unit or division dedicated to the liberation of Crimea. In fact, the liberation of Crimea should be handled by our naval force. That's the optimal solution. They should have drone forces within their structure. We've talked about this so many times, and it was a bit incorrect before. A general drone forces unit has been created, but they should have their own dedicated drone forces as well. Within Nishpa, within the Navy, within the naval forces, so that they can operate underwater drones, surface drones, and aerial drones, plus the same Neptunes. Neptune, let me repeat, is a missile from the coastal missile complex, which is directly subordinate to Dnipro. And so a sufficient number of forces and assets of this level, plus Dnipro, absolutely needs to be given command over at least one squadron, for example, a squadron of Mirages, as naval aviation to operate against sea and ground targets in Crimea. And then this process will set the task for Dnipro. Here's your piece of work. Assign him the task of liberating Crimea so that he focuses solely on Crimea and nothing else. Our sailors should be engaged in the liberation of Crimea. And then it will become a systematic, planned effort, daily, nightly work to drive the Russian presence out of Crimea. If this systematic work begins, those lines you mentioned at the Kerch Bridge, believe me, remember we talked about it, people will be swimming freestyle, breaststroke, and even doggy paddle. That's the optimal scenario, because not everyone will be able to cross the Kerch Bridge. Roman.
Igorovich, while preparing for our interview today, I noted that the occupiers do not have a sufficient number of available air defense systems, yet they continue to concentrate them in Crimea. The reason is fear of a Ukrainian offensive, claims a Crimean resident, former spokesperson of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Vladislav Seleznev. The occupiers believe in the possibility of a seaborne landing, which is why for the third year in a row they have been building engineering fortifications along the coasts of the Black Sea, Yevpatoria, and Simferopol districts. This line of defense is destroyed by storms every year, but they keep restoring it again and again. This only means one thing: the occupiers are not confident in Crimea's defensive capability. What do you say? That was a quote.
Believe me, I once served back in the Soviet Union. I started in the Soviet Army. This is a bit of a different task. It's when there's nothing to do, so they come up with some task just to keep the personnel busy. Look, there are several tens of thousands of Russian troops in Crimea. They really have nothing to do there. Well, maybe spying on girls at the beach with binoculars. And so that they don't get any stupid ideas in their heads, they shove shovels into their hands and give them the task of digging everything up back and forth. In Crimea, knowing that the first storm will just cover up everything they've dug. Then they're given the same task again, and once more they dig everything up back and forth. Back in the Soviet Union, green paint, they used to paint the leaves, the grass that had turned yellow. This is called the connection between space and time. You take a shovel in your hands and dig a trench from lunch to dinner. The connection between space and time, well, that's more or less how it goes. It's exactly the same picture here. It's pointless work, but it at least ties the Russian troops to some kind of task, however insignificant. Then they keep poking around. In principle, for the overall strategic objective, it's correct. But the thing is, an amphibious landing in Crimea is only possible after we liberate Skadovsk. An amphibious landing in Crimea from Skadovsk to Crimea is 50 kilometers. It's 50 kilometers to Skadovsk or somewhere around there. Near Hola Pristan, if, for example, you want to cut off and start an operation to liberate Crimea, a ground operation, then you already need to cross to the left bank to land or to force a crossing. The Dnipro heading towards Skadovsk. But from Skadovsk to Crimea, it's 50 kilometers by sea. Believe me, boats can make it in an hour and a half, 2 hours. That's when a real danger arises. Right now, there is a danger. The Russians, they understand perfectly well that if there is an airborne landing, whether by helicopters or planes, but you won't be able to dig, say, any defensive positions. Shells will just fly in and that's it. So to sum up, what are the Russians doing? They're just wasting their time. And that's about it. By carefully building these fortification routes, in the end, maybe they'll ultimately be healthier for it.
Roman Igorovich, Yuri Butusov posted a video and wrote that there was an attempt by Russian occupiers to cross the Dnipro in the occupied part of Kherson region. It ended before it even began. Everyone was destroyed. Please give us your assessment.
Such attacks have been happening for several months now, every day, and there are several attacks per day. Not all of them end up in the video stream. Yuri Butusov is a competent journalist. He was a soldier at one time, and now he is fighting. So he can create such video content, and we owe him a lot for that. Thank you. Why? Because he knows it well. He's been fighting since 2012, and even since 2014, he just knows it very well. In other words, the way he presents material is very concise and to the point. because, well, let me repeat, there are several such attacks per day, and this has been going on for several months in a row. The Russian left bank group has been given a task, harassing strikes on the right bank, that is, attempts to gain a foothold somewhere on the right bank. First, they are trying step by step to take full control of the islands, especially in the lower part of the Dnipro. We thoroughly work through every island inside and out, drones and our artillery, sometimes aviators as well. So in this direction, somewhere from the Kinban Spit to Kakovka along the left bank, it's a constant attempt. The Russians keep pounding the right bank, but they know exactly what they're getting into. It's a one-way trip for many of them. Not every bird makes it to the middle. They don't even get halfway across. It's the same story. Not every Russian even dares to try to swim to the middle of the Dnipro. If they do, the Ukrainians will send them right back, dog paddling to the other side. When the boat they're trying to cross to the right bank and gets hit, if anyone survives, that's all that's left.
Roman Grigorievich, let's move on to our favorite segment, explosions on Russian territory. Ukrainian long-range kamikaze drones attacked the Alabuga Special Economic Zone in Tatarstan. There are factories there, including the production of drones, Shahed, also known as Geran 2. What do you think?
Geran 2, also known as Potsol 200, but this needs to be clearly understood. Because when people say Geran 2 is the same as Shahed, let me tell you this. There is not a single component of Iranian origin in the Geran 2s. Why? Because after disassembling all these Gerans that come to us, either in production or otherwise, progress, this is the world. Russian, mainly the electronics. Plus everything else is Chinese. Most of it is Chinese. There are also some components and assemblies. Old French ones, old American ones. You can now buy a kilogram of them at flea markets for just 1 hryvnia. They are also used in these, and the carbon fiber body is Russian. Plus, there are also some so-called parachuting or rescue systems. Belarusian from Belavia. That is, there's a factory in Vitebsk and some drones that are designed to return, so-called reconnaissance drones, use Belarusian parachutes specifically. So the Geran 2 is a Chinese-Russian Belarusian variant with some French and American parts mixed in. There is absolutely nothing Iranian in it. So this whole Shahed label should be dropped, and we should be talking specifically about Russian-Chinese production. Why am I emphasizing this? Because Israeli airstrikes on Iranian Shahed drone factories will have no impact on the production of these drones. They're made from Chinese components. These are now two completely different lines of production. After Pezeshkian was elected president of Iran, he's a politician with a pro-European orientation, at least to some extent. Since his election, Russia has not received any military assistance from Iran on our side. There are no Iranian missiles. Not a single Iranian missile has been launched at Ukrainian territory. Ask anyone you like, not a single Iranian one. There were Korean ones, Chinese ones, old Soviet ones, meaning Russian. There were no Iranian ones, and the Shaheds have been gone for a long time now. That might have been under the previous president. There were at least some connections back then. Now it's purely Chinese. What am I getting at? Even if you completely destroy all Shahed production in Iran, the production of Iranians won't stop. To actually stop Iranian production, our armed forces are doing the right thing. They're destroying the assembly plants. Right now in Alabuga, in the near future, they should get to Izhevsk. They're still in Izhevsk too. The Chinese have already built a factory. And now the Chinese are building a plant to produce something like the Yarani 4 or Yarani 5 or whatever they end up calling it, Shanzhou or something, it doesn't matter, in North Korea. Right in their own backyard, actually. China and North Korea share several hundred kilometers of border. And between North Korea and Russia, well, just read about it. That's the far eastern Ukrainian People's Republic, and Vladivostok is right there, Zelyony clear. There are only a few dozen kilometers along the river. It's foggy. That's why all the drones that are currently flying toward us, approaching our position, are either of Russian, Chinese manufacture, like those same Geran drones, or they're still of Israeli production. At one time, Israel built a factory in Russia for the production of heavy reconnaissance drones, heavy unmanned aerial vehicles, which they still use to this day. This includes the fact that the Lancet drone is actually the Israeli Heron 400. That's why there are problems with perceiving this whole reality. At the moment, nothing Iranian is flying at us. So any strikes on Iran won't bring us anything at all. But what needs to be destroyed are the Chinese, Korean, and Russian ones. The more, the better. The strike was carried out basically. Not bad for the first time. They tried to drop an aerial bomb on Alabuga. This is our light aircraft converted into a drone, the A-22 Aeroprak, as it's called, which is now learning to drop aerial bombs. They say it's a 250-kilogram bomb, but that's unlikely because it's too heavy and would be hard to carry far. I think it's a 100-kilogram one, the so-called FAB-100. So they missed the building. The bomb didn't hit its target. Instead, this aerial bomb landed in the parking lot. That is the car park for the employees of this factory who are directly involved in the assembly. Of these Jaran drones, I think about a dozen Chinese workers, to put it mildly, were scared out of their wits after that strike. I don't know if they'll come back or not to China, but I don't think this will be the last strike. Roman Grigorievich, the Ukrainian Armed Forces attacked the airbase at Rososh in the Voronezh region. There's video of the strike. Everything is on fire. What could have been targeted there? So, enemy tactical aviation, fuel, the runway. Well, that's Butulinovka probably. So, most likely, yes, that's it. There was a strike on the airfield. Russian tactical aviation is stationed there. It's a forward airfield for army aviation for Russian helicopters. Transit depots, so-called, and of course, mainly it's airfield technical equipment of any level, at least ground-based, plus fuel and lubricant storage. Where was the strike directed? Well, there's already confirmation. It was confirmed that the strike was successful, effective. At the very least, that's why this is systematic work by our armed forces to destroy the Russian military's resources, both.
We need to do this every night there, up to several times a week, to strike enemy military airfields, fuel infrastructure, and both tactical and strategic aviation. This is the right approach. We understand that this is very effective.
The systematic nature of this work is crucial. If there is no system, Russia manages to repair everything in time, and it brings us no benefit. On the contrary, it does more harm when drones are simply written off. Systematic action depends on whether there is aviation at a particular airfield, the use of engineering service systems, that is, special engineering units for preparing missiles and equipment. Our intelligence knows all of this. So when there is a planned approach to operations, and right now we can see that things are being done according to plan. Every day, every night, we go on air with you every other day. We are discussing the planned operations of our army. Now it's the armed forces that are involved, not the special services. The armed forces have started systematic work to destroy military targets. We definitely need to add something else here. We need to resume the destruction of Russian oil refineries. Any Russian oil refinery is a legitimate military target because they produce diesel, gasoline, and aviation kerosene for the Russian army.
Roman Grigorievich, last night the Oriol region was attacked. There are a huge number of videos from there. I looked into which military facilities are located there and what could have been hit by the Ukrainian armed forces.
Well, according to the information provided, at least by Russian public channels, everything was shot down over the oil refinery. So we hope this is something we'll confirm next time. For now, the general staff hasn't confirmed anything, but we hope that finally, and the army, this is army work, it was. In other words, there's no hope left for the special services. The sanctions of Malyak and Budanov, which used to be in place for strikes on oil refineries, are dead. Well, the guys went in the wrong direction, so to speak. They just faded away. Now there is hope that our armed forces, the actual Ukrainian army, is starting to strike, including at oil refineries. This is very important for us. Why? There are two objectives to accomplish. First, we are depriving the Russian army of fuel. We don't let them get the fuel they need to move. Aviation kerosene for aircraft flights. Second, this is the Russian military economy, because the Russians get $1/3 trillion from their oil and gas industry. $1/3 trillion. Now they're going to get even more, about twice as much. Because your little war in the Middle East, which Israel started, will allow the Russian oil industry to double its income. And this is going to come down on our heads, because then it will rain down on us. With North Korean KN-23s, those North Korean missiles will show up again in the world and someone will buy them. Putin will buy them with those petrodollars. So for us, this will be a problem, because in order to avoid it, in order to keep our soldiers safe, and Ukraine as well, all of Ukraine, must be protected from Russian airstrikes by destroying hydrocarbons, completely burn it down to zero. So right now you should be thinking about helping the Ukrainian army. You need to help Russian partisans destroy the Russian hydrocarbon industry. This is what we've come to, can you imagine? With all these dances around the fire, only it's not clear what for.
Drones attacked Nevinomysk Azot, a plant in the Stavropol region, and in Russia's Samara region, the Novokuybishevsk catalyst plant, which is part of Rosneft's structure. Roman Grigorievich.
These are chemical industry plants, so-called. Both of them produced additives. There are specific additives for aviation kerosene, some for increasing density or for temperature. There are a lot of chemical materials that are produced only in the chemical industry. These are purely military facilities because their products are used, for example, in the production of the same carbon fiber for the Geran tube. So naturally, it's necessary to destroy both the production itself, for example, of those same gerans in Alabuga, and also to destroy the production of this carbon fiber or additives for carbon fiber at chemical plants in Russia. This is also systematic work. That's clear. I want to emphasize this once again. Finally, planned operations have begun. You can feel the influence of the chief of the general staff. That's Hanatov working. In other words, the new chief of the general staff. He's doing an excellent job. You can sense the systematic approach in the work of our long-range strike capabilities now.
Roman Yegorovich, a video has appeared showing the crash of a Russian Su-25 near Soledar. Everyone is saying that it was most likely shot down by another Russian aircraft. What do you think? As I understand it, these kinds of plane crashes have been happening quite often among the Russians lately.
There are many reasons, especially with the Su-25s. These are old 40-year-old grandpas that still seem to be carrying out combat missions. We fly them too. They're not bad planes, they're actually quite stable. But when flying in pairs, they can fall apart on their own, crash on their own. But when flying in pairs, especially when firing in pairs, I noticed that you can't do it like that. The thing is, the wingman almost shot down the lead plane, even though he wasn't aiming at him. The point is, they were firing NIRS, so-called unguided rockets. Unguided aviation rockets, also called NARA, but we call them nurses. So when the wingman fires nurses, if, for example, one of the stabilizers doesn't deploy, even if just one doesn't open, the rocket immediately veers off course. And most likely that was the impact. Specifically, it was from such a nurse with an undeployed stabilizer hitting the lead aircraft. In other words, they just rushed it. The wingman hurried to fire. He should have waited until the lead aircraft moved aside and only then fired. But as it turned out, he basically fired almost simultaneously with the lead. So these are errors in piloting technique and mistakes during combat operations. In this case, and the main thing, as we've already discussed, well, what kind of fool flies on a Friday? The 13th? Well, there you go. One fool flew and crashed. Or two fools, Vladimir Yurievich.
I apologize. So for pilots, this really matters seriously now. Do these Friday dates actually mean something, or are you just trolling? No.
Absolutely not. For pilots, this really does matter a lot. Pilots will go out of their way to avoid a black cat, especially when they're heading to the airfield. On the 13th, as far as I remember, we used to fly. No one flew on the 13th. That was our payday. There were absolutely no aircraft that had the number 13, and there were also no call signs that used 13. My own call sign, for instance, was 00507, but there were never any call signs like 13. So this isn't trolling, not at all. This is exactly the kind of problem that society brings into decision-making, even for pilots. Sometimes it's a matter of split seconds, literally fractions of a second, when the flight crew needs to make a decision, not just to save themselves, but to act quickly. Sometimes it's just like that. Flying on the 13th, just taking off on the 13th, or being on board number 13, or with call sign 13, already puts a person's mind into a different mode, especially if they're already stressed, I would say. All pilots are stressed.
Roman Igorovich, we always assess the situation very professionally with you. You never let emotions take over, and I would like us to approach the next information from a military and professional point of view. A huge number of American media outlets are now suddenly starting to report. Ukrainian Telegram channels are quoting them, and I would like everything to be without panic. Here is the Washington Post quoting Ukrainian sources. Sumy will be wiped off the face of the earth if Russia advances into the city by 10 to 15 kilometers. Thus, Sumy will be targeted by enemy artillery in response to such a threat. There are 5 kilometers left. I read this news this morning in all the Telegram channels. I would like our audience to have the calm confidence of our armed forces of Ukraine. Please assess this information soberly and give your evaluation to our dear respected audience.
Well, the thing is, Sumy is a very large area target. It's a city with a very large area. To wipe it off the face of the earth, well, regular army artillery is not enough. That is, if you want to wipe Sumy off the face of the earth, you would need to send in bombers. Heavy ones. To drop hundreds of free-falling aerial bombs. If you've seen footage, say, from the last century of the bombing of Dresden, that's about what it would look like. There's simply no other way to do it. You can't erase a city from the face of the earth, especially not with artillery, let alone regular army artillery. So whenever this kind of position starts to appear somewhere, you have to ask, why even throw this idea out there in the first place? First of all, army artillery is definitely dangerous within its operational depth, meaning within the effective range of army artillery. What is the effective range of army artillery? Mostly about 15 kilometers. 15 kilometers, but artillery isn't always positioned right at the line of contact. It's usually set back 5 to 10 kilometers. So in order for army artillery to wipe Sumy off the face of the earth, they would have to move along the front through Sumy together with the artillery in one direction. For example, look at what they're doing in Volchansk right now. They're wiping it out, no question about it. But Volchansk is several times smaller. They've been messing around in Sumy for the second year now. That's one thing. Second, getting close to Sumy. That's very difficult. The Russians now, why are they running around so frantically near Sumy? Because they're still wandering around in the fields for now. They're still in the fields. They haven't reached the forests or the tree lines yet, meaning our main fortified areas are in the tree lines, not in the open fields. I mean, what kind of fool would dig trenches in an open field for defensive fortifications? If you know perfectly well that in the field you'll get hit for sure because you stand out like a Christmas tree. But right now, the Russians are in the fields, and in those fields, they're getting taken out in batches by the company, just wiped out every day in that direction. So at the moment, there's absolutely nothing to worry about. At the moment, for there to be any real threat, the Russians would have to send another 1,050 to 1,070 troops there. It's just not realistic for them to get that many from anywhere. The main question is, why would they even do that? Is there even such a concept? Strategic perspective? Well, there is no strategic perspective for advancing on Sumy. Absolutely none. It's 300 kilometers to Kyiv. They've been crawling from Luhansk to Pokrovsk 160 kilometers for 11 years. If you do the math at that pace, how long would it take them to reach Kyiv? 24 years. And that's in the best case scenario for the Russians. That was the pace from Luhansk to Pokrovsk. So there is absolutely no strategic perspective at all. Right now, what's happening near Sumy is the creation of front lines. In fact, it's the establishment of front lines. Sometimes it's even initiated by us. This is very important for us. We need to establish a front line between Ukraine and Russia so that it doesn't happen again. Some kind of incursion into Chernihiv, Sumy, or even Kyiv, though before Kyiv there are still Drigailov, Pryluki, Novy Bikiv, Basan, Brovary. I'm just recalling this roughly from the map, from memory. So in order to prevent this, we need to create a front line, a northern front. We need to establish it. Right now, it's being formed from both sides. Any further advance by the Russians in the Sumy area will be similar to what happened near Kharkiv. The Kharkiv grouping there was much stronger. They got stuck in the outskirts near Kharkiv, got bogged down in Vovchansk. The same thing will happen here near Sumy, where they're currently milling around. That's where they'll be taking losses. Out in these open fields, they're running like rabbits now and will keep taking losses there. And they're really losing groups there. You just need to reinforce that area, maybe hit it harder with strikes, and that's all that needs to be done there.
Dear audience, Roman Grigorievich and I meet 3 times a week on my YouTube channel, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So please support us by liking this video, leaving a few kind words in the comments in support of the armed forces of Ukraine, and also let us know where you're watching from. We work for an audience all over the world so that people know the truth about Russian aggression, about Russia's war against Ukraine. That's why every comment you leave, every like you give is invaluable. Please know that we are grateful to you for this.